How's it going, everybody? Welcome to this week's LUMIX Live. Okay, cool. Everything worked. Welcome to this week's LUMIX Live. We've got the part 3 of our 3-part series on the back to the basics with LUMIX cameras. So we started this series, obviously, with the just ultra basics of the camera. So general operation functions, things like that, how to program buttons, all that kind of fun stuff. The second stream was more on the photography side of capabilities. We didn't get to everything on the photography one. I'm already still working on wanting to do kind of a revisit of the second part of this series with the hard drive failure I had and all that kind of stuff, and then scheduling conflicts for last Thursday meant that I didn't have time to get back to finish that one. But we're just going to soldier forward, and we've got part 3 with the video-specific functionalities on the LUMIX cameras to generally cover today. So going down the list of the stuff that we're going to touch on and kind of show you and talk about and demonstrate with an S1 Mark IIe here is going to be about the frame rates, what you can do with them in the camera, how to filter through them, all that kind of fun stuff. And that's going to tie also with resolutions. We're going to talk about proxy video recording on some of the newer cameras that have that capability. Then we're going to dive into some of the exposure tools that I can share over HDMI, so false color, luminance spot, zebras. We'll talk about color profiles as well, so that's going to include a little bit of real-time LUT and some of the functionalities that are available there and how to use it on the camera. Then we'll dive into crop zoom and hybrid zoom, a couple things to keep in mind when wanting to use those modes, especially when it comes to the video functionality. We'll touch on image stabilization setups, various different anamorphic tools, and then we'll also talk about focus transition and live cropping for the cameras that happen to have that available. We'll also touch on dual native ISO settings, so we'll do a run through of what the various native ISOs are. I'm using the S1 Mark IIe on purpose for this particular stream since it's going to share the most commonalities for dual native ISO with the S5 Mark II series cameras. And then we'll wrap it up by talking about audio and sound and how you can interact with our cameras and get the most out of the audio capture, especially with the S1II series that supports 32-bit float audio with the XLR2 adapter. As always, throughout the stream, if you have questions, things that you want to chat about, make sure to tag at LUMIX USA in the chat. As you can see, some are doing. It helps me see the comments so I can try to get to as many of those questions as possible. Yeah, we'll kind of just go from there with this. If you are in the US and you haven't already, take a look at LUMIX Pro Services Red and Platinum. These are our 2 service and support programs in the US. If you're not in the US, we do still have service and support programs. They're done through the Panasonic service and support program, so you can always have access to getting issues sorted for your camera and lens equipment. But in the United States, the red tier is free. You can follow the QR code right below me, or you can just go to lumix-pro.us. It's going to redirect you to the new registration page. Get yourself registered for free. It's going to add your 3-year manufacturer warranty. And then if you want a higher level of service and support, you can take a look at the Platinum membership. That is a paid level service. It's going to get you that 3-year manufacturer warranty like the free level does. But on top of it, you're going to get a number of extra benefits. You're going to get 20% off out of warranty repairs. So drops, breaks, damage that's not covered under warranty, you get a discount. You get 2-day repairs with next day shipping both ways, so you are out of your gear for a very minimal amount of time. You also get access to membership hotline if you'd rather speak to somebody instead of going through chat or emails. You can call into a number Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And then last but not least, you also get an annual sensor cleaning setup, lens firmware updates, calibrations, all of the normal stuff like for maintenance that maybe you don't want to do on your own. You'd rather have the professionals take care of it. So you also have access to that when you're in the Platinum tier. So if you're interested, follow the QR code below, go to the website, links down in the description, get yourself registered for it. If you have purchased the LUMIX camera, I highly recommend at least just getting on the red tier. It's free, it gets you in the program. And yeah, kind of good to go from there. So, let's take a look really quick, some of the comments that have come in before I dive in, because I got a lot I want to kind of cover today for this. Can you say more about improvements in image quality with crop zoom? We are going to talk about crop zoom. I don't know if I would say image quality improvements or, improvement in image quality, but we're going to talk about hybrid zoom and crop zoom. Can you say something about the rumors? So straight up, rumors, there's a phrase. Rumors are like, everyone has one. We don't comment on rumor sites because they're money pits of people trying to drive traffic to a website for their own personal financial gain, and rarely do they actually ever have anything behind them. So good luck. You can keep looking on rumor sites if you desire. I don't recommend it. Usually it's a bunch of made up stuff that is only done to drive traffic to a website so the website owner can make money off of all of your search histories and traffic and cookies that are left on your computers when you go to their page. Anyway, how's it going? It's going great. Media space is so crazy. I would love to see an advertisement talking about how you guys can preserve the price for media with the image quality you produce at lower bit rates. That would be an interesting take on the current space of media costs or memory costs. And then last one before I dive into this, will you be at CP Plus? Unfortunately, no. I really want to go to CP Plus one year. I've been here going on 11 years in April, and I haven't been to Japan for CP Plus. It would be a cool show to go to, but unfortunately, no, I will not be there. I will be stateside here. All right, cool. Let's kind of go down this list. We'll cover a couple of them, and then we'll come back to questions. So if you have questions, like as I go through some of this stuff, just drop them in the chat, tag at LUMIX USA, and then we'll kind of circle back periodically and address some questions. So when we start talking about videography with LUMIX cameras, or video cinematography, whatever you want to call it, I'm just going to shorthand call it videography just for the sake of simplicity. So there are a ton of varying different frame rates, resolutions, compressions, and all those different things available within the cameras. Some cameras have a heck of a lot more. Other cameras have substantially less. But in general, any interchangeable lens camera, any point and shoot, any fixed lens camera, they're almost all going to have some level of video functionality built into them, because modern cameras are effectively video cameras that happen to be able to take stills as well, and they take incredible stills. As we moved away from optical viewfinders, we had to read, the image off of a screen, right? So video, whether personally some people like it or not, it's just a part of the hardware that exists these days. So when we start looking at frame rates in general, we're going to jump over to the camera now. If you've not ever really looked too deep into these options, you'll see that like a lot of our iconography, our naming structure is going to be the same across pretty much any one of our cameras. The menus themselves may physically look different, but the icons will almost always be the same, and the names will almost always be the same. So even if, though I'm demoing on an S1 Mark IIe, if you don't have an S1 Mark IIe, just look for the icons. The positions may be a little different, but all the icons will be the same, and the names should be the same across the board. So when we first start looking at this, you want to approach frame rates, I would say, by first looking at what format do you want to be recording in, right? If you've purchased a new LUMIX camera and you've just, turned it on and you flipped it into video and you looked, you're most likely going to see that the camera is going to be defaulted into MP4 video. This is for a number of reasons. One, MP4 is more universally compatible with Windows, Mac, iPhone, Android, the vast majority of platforms that people may be wanting to put their video content on. It's also lighter weight recording options, so that's usually where the codec, or the in this case the wrapper, is set at by default. If you want to maximize the amount of resolutions and frame rates and codec and compressions and everything that's available to you, this is where you would immediately go in here and change this to MOV. MOV is going to be, it's still very widely compatible across, all the different platforms. To be clear, it's not like you're going to go into this and then, you're just never going to be able to edit it. You probably have more issues on a mobile device editing MOV footage than MP4 footage, to be fair, considering phones, range wildly between what people have and their capabilities. But if you want to get the highest resolution, the highest capabilities, the best audio functionality, the best proxy settings, you're going to want to put the camera in MOV. So why do I say that to begin with? Well, because when we go to the rec options here, or the rec quality, which is where your frame rates and resolutions are housed, this is where you're going to see the largest number of options available. And there's a reason why I want to show you the largest options available. So as you start going through this and you click in, you're going to notice a couple of things. And I'm going to reset this here so that we get a fresh way to look at this. You're going to notice that in this case, on an S1 Mark IIe, there are 15 pages worth of frame rates, resolutions, and compression and bitrate combinations. That is a lot. It is a ton of different variables. And for a lot of people, you may look at some of these and be like, well, what is the difference? Like, am I really going to see any difference between, the 24-bit or let's go to a 4K. If I go to 4K 24, or no, I can do it right here on the screen. If I go between 6K 24p 420 10-bit long GOP or the other 6K 420 10-bit long GOP, like, what am I actually going to see here? The reason you have all of these different options is because there may be certain circumstances, whether it's a frame rate option, whether it's an aspect ratio option, whether it's a subtle resolution difference, and more importantly, is it going to be an intra, a long GOP, and then is it going to be like what kind of bit rate options? So there was the comment before about media costs and how you can get higher quality at lower bit rates, things like that. You have all of these just blanket available to you in the majority of LUMIX cameras. So to start with, let's start stripping down this 15-page option here through the different categorizations. So let's start with frame rates. Frame rates in general, and some of this, if you are experienced in videography, bear with me. I'm going to try to break some of this stuff down so that it's a little bit easier for people to understand that may come across this. If you're going to be looking for various different outputs, you may notice that in shorthand, in the icons in the middle of the screen here, you notice that it says 30p, 24 frame, 60 frame, 48 frame. That's the shorthand. So in general, shorthand of 30 frames per second, 24, 60, 120, 48. It's just what we use as the rounded up version of the actual frame rate. Now, it becomes a little bit of a catch at 24 frame because there is also a true 24.00 frames per second option in the cameras, but we'll dive into that later. Picking your frame rate on the cameras is super simple. You have a couple of different ways to do it. You can either just be going straight through this 15-page option and going all the way through and just trying to pay attention to the numbers. It can be daunting. You may miss certain things, and you may run into a situation where it's like, I cannot find for the life of me the option that I want to record in. Within our cameras, you can just press the display button, which opens up a filtering menu. Then I can look and you can see that I can filter that 15 pages down between frame rates, resolutions, codec, whether or not I can shoot hybrid log gamma, and also whether or not I can shoot proxy recording. So in this case, let's take 48 frames per second as a selection. So I can come in here, I can say, hey, 47.95. Well, that's not 48. Well, it's because the common vocabulary for this is going to be rounded up. So we call this 48 frames per second. When I click on this, you're going to see that I just took that 80 plus option of results and I've just cut it down to 20. So from here, all I have to do is hit display, And now I've got just the 48 frames per second options that are available on this camera. Now again, I'm using the S1 Mark IIe, which means the largest I can do is 6K, 48 frames per second, which is going to be full sensor width, but it's going to be in the 2:4:1 aspect ratio. So if I select this, and hopefully it doesn't break my switch, which it might. Let's deactivate that. Let's activate this again. There it goes. You'll see that now I'm at 48 frames per second. You see that I got the top and bottom chopped off, and cool, we're there. That's how you can, kind of split out what kinds of resolutions you want to record, or frame rates you want to record at. If you know that you've got a project and it's got to be in 30 frames per second, well, cool. Go in, filter for 2997. You'll see that we got 23 options here. If I hit display, it's back. You'll also notice that this is where you start getting a much larger selection of various different aspect ratios. So at 30 frames per second and below, you effectively have all of the aspect ratios available to you. So from 3:2 open gate to 2:4:1 to 16:9, 17:9, you have them all available. You'll also have a 4:3 aspect ratio. So if I go in and I change this, and I probably have to cycle my switch again. I promise I'm not going to go between, I'm not going to go back into 48 frames again. So now we're back into 30p. So that's the basics of frame rate with our cameras. You can go through, you can filter, select which ones that you want. You'll know if you select any, you have the entire option available. You select the individual one, you hit display, and then it's only going to show you those options that are, for the frame rate that you want. Now, there is a secondary part of this, which is going to then come into resolution. So let's reset this. You see you have 89 options available. That's 59 pages, or 15 pages worth. You'll notice that we've got everything from 6K in 3:2, you've got 6K in 17:9, we've got 6K in 2:4:1 aspect ratio on this particular camera. So it's a lot of 6K options, and the shorthand is going to just say 6K. It doesn't tell you what aspect ratio that particular option is going to be recording in. So a lot of times you're going to want to end up, filtering that as well. You're not always going to want to shoot an open gate. Sometimes you're going to want to shoot in that 2:4:1 ratio because you want a delivered aspect ratio just that you're capturing. Or maybe you want to hit a frame rate that's not available in the full sensor height, like that 48 frame, but you still want 6K in horizontal resolution. Cool. You can just go in and say, hey, hit display, go to filter, then you're going to go to resolution, and this is where it gets a little bit clearer. You'll see 6K 3:2, 6K 17:9, 6K 2:4:1. If I come into this part of it and I go, all right, let's filter out because I want to look for that 2:4:1 aspect ratio. Click into here. It's now filtered those 89 options down to 4. I hit display again. And now here are my 2:4:1 aspect ratios that are going to be available to me. You see that we have 24, 30, 48, and 60 all available. But we mentioned before that we're going to be doing 30 frames per second. So we need to do 30 frames per second as a frame rate filter. And then under resolution, I need to go to 2:4:1. I hit display. There's my one option. I've now taken that 15 pages and boiled it down to 1 because I know what my project is, I know what frame rate, and I know what aspect ratio I want to have it set up to. Cool. We've got it there. But say I want to add one more thing onto this, that I also want to be able to record proxy files. Well, I can come in and say on, and we'll say, oh, well, 2:4:1 I can't record proxy files with. Well, let me back out of this, hit any, and I have 16. So at 30 frames per second, I have 16 options that I can use to record with proxies. If I hit menu set, it shows me that filter, and you'll see that proxy files are going to be in the 4K or the C4K range and below. Now I know, okay, I want a 2:4:1 ratio. I can either just scroll down through this, because now we're only down to 3 pages. I can see, okay, CS4K, which is going to tell me 2:4:1 ratio, 30 frames per second, It's 400 megabits. This is an all-intra codec. I've got my 2:4:1 ratio at 30 frames per second. It's an all-intra codec. And I will be able to also record a proxy out of this that I can save onto the second card so that maybe my editing can be a little bit better, or if I want to utilize a feature like the Frame.io functionality, I can have that being sent up into the cloud immediately there. One last thing about this is so obviously going through this, right? This is cool for a single use. Like, hey, I got to find a single resolution, a single frame rate. All right, fine. I'll go through, filter out to the things I want. I pull up either the one or the handful of the aspect ratio and frame rate combinations that I'm looking for. I can then figure out what bit rate I want to use, whether or not I want to use an all intra codec or a long GOP codec. I can select all of that here as well. But once I've got it kind of settled, if any of, the vast majority of us know that we're not always just going to stick to one frame rate and one resolution. If I've got a video project, say I'm filming a wedding or some kind of event, all right, usually, at least in North America, those tend to be 24 frames per second because we want the quote-unquote cinema look. So if I go into 24 frames per second, let's go back in. We want that 2:4:1 ratio. And let's say in this particular case, I don't care about proxies. I'm going to hit display OK. I get my one option. But if I need to change my frame rate again, I don't want to have to keep going in and filtering to find the particular one that I want. This is where you have the option when you're on this screen to hit the Q button and add this to my list. What this now has done is said right here, rec quality my list, I can click into here and only the recording option combinations that I've selected that I need or that I prioritize will only ever show up here as I click through and assign them to my list. This is a great way for situations where, like I said, we had that 24 frame one there. Let's do a 60 frames per second option. Let's also change this again to 2:4:1. We've got the 2:4:1. Let's add this to the my list. And then let's do a 48 frame. Let's do this again also in 2:4:1 ratio. Let's add this in here. And then let's do a 120 frames per second. And we'll select any so that we just get the largest number of them available, which is going to be 3 options on the S1 Mark IIe. And let's say, all right, I want to go full HD, 120 frames per second, but I want that all intra because I want every frame to be its own individual frame. Didn't mean to hit the menu set button. Let's change this. I'm just going to change this back to 30p. Hang on one second. Maybe I don't have to reset my switch. Of course I do. There we go. Okay, where were we? We were here. We were doing this at 120 frames per second. I will just hit the Q menu button, hit yes, and back out of this. And now for any particular job, right? If I know that my delivery is going to be 24 frames per second, I've got the common 60 frames per second slow-mo, which you have the option in this camera if you're in the 2:4:1. Or I could do a proper 2x slowdown with the 48 frame, all in this one setup, and then I have the ultra slow-mo 120 frame for this particular camera at 10-bit all intra. So now I've got my base frame rate, I've got my slow motion frame rate, and then I've got my super slow motion frame rate, all ready to go in one quick menu. The other cool thing here is, yes, you can program these to say the C1, C2, C3 button or switch if you're trying to, or if you know that you always want to use those. But this can be an easier way to manage your frame rates, resolutions, codecs, the combinations of the image quality that you like to work with without having to necessarily force them to always be in a certain mode. So now I don't actually have to change anything on the camera. If I know that, my exposure settings, how I operate the camera, and the color profiles, if that stuff doesn't change, if the only thing I need to change is my frame rates, Now all I'm doing is just going into the menu and just selecting these particular options, or using the my rec quality, in this case the my list, so that I can jump between those different options. All right, so that was the 2 or 3 of them there. I just saw a couple questions or comments come in here. So, hi Sean, do you use the Kalari clip-in optical low-pass filter for L-mount already? No, I don't use low-pass filters. I'm not a fan of them personally. I like the sharper, kind of higher resolution image. I don't shoot or film things that, one, are important enough that people would be picking apart for things like potential moray, and I don't do real estate, but I understand the value of them. I would look at like Dan Hopkins and some of the others that are working with them to get a better opinion of it. So the ones, could we have pre-recorded video similar to pre-mode in photo but for video? I've asked. I don't know if that's something that can be easily deployed in these cameras. Can you go over how to use hybrid log gamma and what scenario it's used for? I can actually do that one very easily. It's not really much of a demonstration for that. The hybrid log gamma color profile. So I'll actually jump this one above false color because this is a good segue into color profiles. Within our cameras, we obviously have a bunch of different color profiles available. We've got, the Leica 709, Cinelike V2, D2, A2 if you're on the newest cameras, all of our photo-based profiles. We have our V-Log, we have ARRILOG C3 if you unlock it. And then you've also got hybrid log gamma. And actually, in many of the cameras, there's 2 different hybrid log gamma options. So the question is, how do you use it and what scenarios do you use it for? In general, hybrid log gamma on these modern cameras, I think, has been misunderstood by a number of people in the industry, or a number of creators that make tutorial content about the camera. Hybrid log gamma is not designed as an editable or a grading start point for your content or the video that you want to create. Hybrid log gamma, the way it's deployed in our cameras, which is in a 420 10-bit, usually HEVC, it is designed as a deliver-ready color profile. What this does is this tags the video footage when you take it right out of the camera off the card, put it on a display or a TV or a media player that recognizes HDR flagging, and it automatically just flags it and shows it as HDR content. Easiest way to see this for yourself, if you just put the camera in HDR or in the HLG color profile, point it outside, set your exposures, use the proper tools to make sure that your highlights are basically as bright as they can get just before they clip, and I'll show you the couple of the tools that you can use to do this. Once you take that card out and you put it in a computer, you're going to immediately see that, one, as long as the media player, so like VLC, can do this, as long as your display is set for HDR or your TV is set for HDR, it's going to flag it and it's going to display it as HDR. You can load this on YouTube. You can put it into Instagram. That's the purpose of that color profile. It's not really a profile designed to grade as a starting point. It doesn't magically give you more dynamic range like some people claim over V-Log or ARRILOG. Dynamic range is dynamic range. The difference is that on with V-Log or ARRILOG, you have to grade it to HDR, but its color gamut and its dynamic range are more than enough to cover what you can do in HLG. It's literally just a shoot and deliver for this. It's a lot of fun to shoot with. So if you're looking at what kind of scenarios maybe you want to use it for, if you just want quick and easy HDR footage and you don't really want to mess around too much in a computer for it, just shoot the projects in HDR, or just shoot the video clip in HDR. The thing you have to remember with working with it is when you bring it into some programs to edit, you have to make sure that when you export it, and even when you ingest it and you're bringing it into the program, you you have to make sure that that it's flat, the program's reading it right, and that it understands that this is a hybrid log gamma Rec 2100 color space, so that it's calibrating your tools correctly for editing. And then when you export, you need to make sure that you export it correctly, whether you export it back out as HLG. You can try to export it out as, Rec 2020 or PQ or as standard 709, but you need to make sure that the processing pipeline is all the same, so that the flagging is all still carried through properly. Most editing software has gotten pretty good at this, and you also have to make sure that the hardware you're using to edit with can process it properly, or at least do it in a reasonable amount of time. So yeah, like that's really the goal for it. Simple, straightforward. Our HLG is based off of the actual standard. So this is a standard that like NHK, I think it's NHK, BBC, Netflix uses, I think, the same 420 10-bit for HLG for like the delivery, because it is a delivery platform. When you try to go edit it, you have to be very careful, because you are still working with, you're not working with a log piece of footage. So it's not, I don't believe it's as malleable as log footage is. Your colors and contrast are going to be pretty well set. Vlog will give you more, or Arilog C3 will give you more flexibility for color grading. But I mentioned that in some cameras, there's more than just HLG, the 2100 that we have right in the camera. So if we go into photo style settings and I go to show and hide photo styles, I think this camera has it. Yes. The S1 Mark IIe also has this other one called HLG 2100 full range. So now if I come in here and I go and I change my hybrid log gamma to full range, one of the things you'll notice is that if I go to full range, at least on YouTube, the way we're presenting here, the black levels are dropping on this. So the black point is showing that it's darker. The full range versus the not full range is just what the general luminance levels are. So this one right out of camera, HLG 2100, when you play it on an HLG display, if you put it on YouTube, it should look exactly like you recorded it. If you were to do this with full range and load it on something like YouTube, you're going to get crushed blacks and you're going to get clipped highlights sooner, because it's not conforming to the HDR, like the HLG kind of range, if that makes sense for some. So that was a good question there. Love the Big 6, but I would love to use it while I use my external monitor. I think there's a way to do that. Hi, LUMIX USA. Is Panasonic's white paper for Vericam Vlog gamut applicable to Vlog profile for S1II? Great ergonomics on the camera body, and by the way, and I hope your team got kudos. Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of the beauty of Vlog. Vlog, it's compatible across all of our cameras. The white paper, the 42 IRE, it's the same on all of the cameras. The difference between whether it's in the Vericam or it was in a GH5 or S5 or S1 Mark II, the only difference between them is just where in a rudimentary sense, the only difference is going to be where the clipping point was, or how much dynamic range was available. Vlog was always calibrated to 42 IRE, so if you set your midtones to 42, the V gamut and Vlog were going to be universal across. Vlog L was a little different because you had the dynamic range differences there, and early on there were tiny little differences there. But yeah, if you work with it between all the cameras, effectively it's going to function the same across the board. You're just going to have different dynamic ranges between them. Any chance Anamorphic D-Squeeze will come to the photo side? I want it to, but more of you, the users, need to let us know that it's something important and that it's something that you guys want to see. I can only request it so much. Matt Fraser can only request it so much. you, the users, if you feel that it's something you want to see in the cameras, you got to tell us and be vocal about it. Because you got to remember, anamorphic desqueeze is a very video-centric from, history. Anamorphic is incredibly video-centric. It's becoming a photo-centric thing now that we've got, really solid lenses that you can use for anamorphic photography. Like, I'm using the 40mm Surrey here. I love shooting photos with it. The process is a little daunting to convert it out of the, squished image out into the actual, desqueezed still. But the more you let us know in the comments under the video, let us know over on Discord under the suggestions channel. The more support that gives Matt and I to go back to engineering teams and kind of help with that. I've just started using LUMIX Lab. When using it for remote shooting, is there a way to check the exposure on the app? If not, I'd like to see a histogram and exposure meter added. So I don't have my stuff set up to connect in LUMIX Lab right now, but I believe you do have an exposure meter on there. As far as histogram, I think you do have a histogram as well on it. I will double check because, like I said, I'm going to go back and do a bit of a follow-up on the stream from 2 weeks ago so that I can dive in, because I didn't really get in enough to lab and some of the other stuff for that. Is there a chance to get downsampled raw photos like 24 megapixel out of the 40 plus megapixel sensor? I'm not sure. I don't believe that's something that is high on our priority list right now. I know that other products out there have some capabilities to do stuff like that. I just don't know if that's like how high up on that list. I know it's not near the top of our list right now because we don't really get many people that ask us for that. But like everything, the more you guys ask us, the more you pitch how you use your cameras and how you want to see some improvements specifically for your use cases, the better it helps us go to our planning teams and our engineering teams with, your feedback. That's one of the reasons why I love these streams, is you guys get to give us the direct feedback that we can share with the engineering teams to say, hey, look, this is what people are asking for. This is what they want to build. This isn't just me asking for it. All of you want these certain things. Doesn't mean it's always going to get implemented, but, you effectively have a direct line with these streams. Okay, one last question, and then we're going to continue on with false color, luminance spot meter, zebras, and crop zoom and hybrid zoom. Can we please get new compact Micro Four Thirds camera and hybrid zoom rocker, and LUTs? I mean, keep asking for stuff. Excuse me. At this point, I have no idea on future plans. Even if I did, the classic, if you've been here long enough, even if I did know what we've got coming, I couldn't talk about it. But yeah, keep voicing the things that you want to see us do in the chat. We read all of it and we take it all to heart. So, okay, let's go back into the camera here. Where were we? Color profiles were actually what we were talking about. So yeah, so like 2100 HLG, that's kind of the basis there. They're direct delivery, color profiles. We have a number of other profiles, obviously, in the camera. So we have a bunch of the monochrome profiles: portrait, landscape, flat, neo, vivid, standard. Thing to remember is that those profiles are all going to be photo based. So if you are ever doing anything where you need to be able to edit it or push and pull the colors and the tonality out of it, do not shoot in these profiles. You're pretty heavily baked into the particular look that is going to come out of the camera. It works fine, I'd say, for things like streaming. Like, I'm streaming right now. I'm using this is an S1 Mark II that's using the USB streaming, and I have it set on portrait for the color right now because I don't want to work on a grade for this. I just, I want it to look decently okay. I still have to work on my lights because they're too bright now. But then you'll notice that there are a bunch of other profiles here when you get into the Cine-like profiles. Cine-like A2, D2, and V2. A2, designed to match, higher-end cinema, out-of-camera Rec. 709 looks. D2, it's a desaturated 709, kind of finished look. V2, it's a more vivid 709, kind of finished, quote-unquote, look. And then you got like 709. So understanding like when you would want to use each of these, the Cine-like profiles, again, just like the HLG profiles, they are designed more as a kind of like delivery color profile. Not really going to need to do much to them in post as long as you make sure that, your white balance is good and your exposure is good. But realistically, these are designed to be set your white balance, make sure your exposure is good, and then you shouldn't really need to do much to them in post. They don't have nearly as much flexibility as a log profile does. But they are cinema oriented, so they are based in the Rec. 709 color space, where the standard color profiles, not the monochrome ones, the standard profiles like portrait, landscape, flat, these are based in sRGB color space. So a much smaller color gamut than Vlog, than 709, than Rec. 2020, or Rec. 2020 is actually within Vlog, or ACES is the full size. So keep those kinds of things in mind. If you need the color flexibility, make sure you're shooting in at least something that is designed in the video space because you have more color to work with. And then you jump into Vlog and ARRILOG C3. We know log profiles. The big difference between these two, obviously, so Vlog, this is Vlog V Gamut. This is our log profile that we have, as we were talking about in the chat. You're able to work with this with any of the already existing Panasonic conversion LUTs that exist. So there are LUTs available from the Vericam, the Evil 1, all the way through. You can use those right on here and convert over. You may notice some slight color shifts between sensor generations because all sensors will have a slight different setup. But as far as the actual dynamic range capabilities, the flexibility of the files, they're all going to be the same. When you go to ARRILOG C3, ARRILOG C3 is ARRILOG C3. This is not a CST. This is not us taking Vlog and creating ARRILOG C3. This is ARRI took the sensor, profiled it for what ARRILOG C3 needs to be, so that when you take this footage and you bring it directly with, footage from an Alexa Mini LF, you can grade them the same way, and they're going to respond the same way. Again, camera brand to camera brand, you will have very subtle differences with just base sensor design that imparts a little bit of color difference there. But at the color matrix level, ARRILOG C3 in our camera is ARRILOG C3 that you're going to use in an Alexa Mini LF. So you have that flexibility. Does it mean that you as a user need this? Does it mean you're going to get more dynamic range? No. It's a workflow thing to make sure that, hey, if your aspirations are, I want to work in ARRI, and eventually, you want to get an LF, a Mini LF, whatever, you could have this camera be able to work in that color profile, in that pipeline. And then if you and when you eventually advance into getting a camera like that, maybe a Mini LF, this still has use. This still acts as a B cam, as a C cam, as something that's solid for just your backup camera in the lineup. So with all these color profiles, cool, right? You've got all the different tools, all the different color profiles. Well, what about setting exposures in these cameras? Now, the vast majority, I'm going to go on a little bit of an assumption here, that the vast majority know that waveforms exist in the industry. We have waveforms, we have a vector scope as well. I can't demonstrate them out over HDMI because they are onboard camera settings or exposure tools. Many of your monitors that you may be using for the larger screen, they'll have their own vector scopes, they'll have their own waveforms as well, so you've got those tools inherently. But within the newest series, the S1II series, we introduced false color. So I'm going to enable false color here. And you have a now color-coded tool to identify where your exposure is, where your midtones are, where your highlight is, where your highlights are about to clip. But if you've never used false color before, when you go into our menus to activate the particular feature or the tool, we have an index available. So you'll see that you've got anything that's in red is going to be third stop below clipping. Anything that's yellow is going to be 2/3 stop below clipping. Anything pink is 1 stop above 18% gray. And then green is middle gray. So I mentioned that Vlog is 42 IRE. Well, Arilog C3 is 43 IRE. So what that tells me is that if I'm using this scale, oh, and then blue is the edge of your shadow detail, and then anything that's in purple or, well, it looks purple to me. I'm partially colorblind. Anything that's in purple is going to be, that's your noise floor. There's not really any info there. So what this tells me right here is that this spot right here behind the lens, that's showing up at 18%. And then everything pink here is 1 full stop above that. So if I want to really set my exposure right and understand, like, you know, how my exposure should be for this particular shot, that's where I'm going to be coming in and playing with my exposure values here to kind of see what do I need to have this set to get me the right exposure. So as I start to change this, you'll see under my particular lighting scenario, I can't really get anything else out here to be properly lit unless I take a flashlight. So see, now we're changing that up. I can get to my greens to where that's going to be my 18%. Anything in that pink area is going to be above, or a stop above that. This is super quick, super fast, and easy to be able to judge your exposure and understand where you know, your general exposure needs to be, so that on the fly I can flip this on, I can flip it off, and I don't necessarily have to do it visually through a LUT. I can just flip this on, check it, hold my hand out in front under the lighting, and I can make sure that my skin tones are in the right spot if I need to, as long as you're under the same light as your subject. And then flip it off and just continue to recording. And it adjusts based on the color profile that you're in. So right now, false color, we see I'm in Arilog C3. We see that we are green just right here. And then we're pink on the table. Well, if I turn this off and let's change color profiles. Let's go to standard. If I turn false color on, notice how different it is. Now there's the green is more out on the edge. I'm still kind of in the pink here, but all of my shadow regions are much, much further down. I'm more in the noise floor. I'm more basically all the way out of the range as far as like where my exposure goes. So you can keep that in mind when you want to use false color as a quick way to identify what my general exposure should be. So if I go into portrait, change it up again, you see again, it changes. Mostly in these profiles, it's going to change more in the shadows here because you're giving them more info, or less info because it's being baked in more. If I come in, and if we change this into, let's do SmallRig A2, you'll see that again, even especially down here, a lot more in the greens. This is no longer really as much in the purple, in the pinks. So false color gives you a really, really simple way to judge your exposure. But if you're not necessarily worried about overall exposure, if you're someone who prefers to expose for the highlights, or like I said, if you're going to be shooting for hybrid log gamma and you want to shoot so that your brightest highlights are basically as bright as they can possibly get, this is where our luminance spot meter comes in. So luminance spot meter, there's the icon, that's the name of it in the menu. What luminance spot meter allows me to do is move a target box anywhere on the frame, and then it's going to report back to me what the exposure value is in that particular spot. So if I am here in Arilog C3, you'll see right now that the wall here, out in the back, the wall is plus 2.5 stops over the calibrated middle gray, or calibrated, in this case, 43 IRE, or 42 if you're in Vlog. So now what I can do is I can come in and I can start working with my ISO values and say, by the ratings, this should be 1600 ISO, means that that wall is now proper middle gray. If I double check this with false color, you see that it shows up there. Now, obviously, as I move my hand around, it changes the shadows, but you'll see that it's right in the green. It's at middle gray. So this is the other tool that you can use to kind of really find a way to maximize the brightness that you get in a particular frame. So if I take a light here, see how I can do this effectively. I might not be able to do it because my office is a little too dark this time. But if you're going to try to shoot to make sure that your highlights are as bright as they can go, this is where you can use that luminance spot meter, and if you keep watching the number, it's 1.4, 2.8, 3 point, and it's all the way up to 5.1. That's about as bright as I can get it in this room without blowing out the rest of the lighting here. I don't know, I can do it with shutter speed too. We'll bring the shutter speed up. You'll see at 358 degrees, we're at 5.8, 5.9 stops over middle gray. What that's telling me, as long as, in this case now it's 6, what that tells me is that that highlight is 6 stops over middle gray. So all my shadows are lifted, my highlights are at 6 stops. As I go through that particular range, if I go in and I look, you'll see that it says I am now within a third of a stop of blowing out all of my highlights there. My luminance spot meter says that, well, I'm 6 stops over. We know that I've got enough headroom over this. I could now just come in and say, well, let me bring it back by a third. If I look back at false color, you'll see that I'm safely in the yellow range there now. That means that I have pushed my exposure as bright as I can, and I know that when I bring this into post for something like 709 or HDR grading, or if I'm shooting in HLG, those highlights are going to be as bright as they possibly can get. They're not going to be clipped. They will just be as bright as they can go and maximize the amount of tonality with the highlights. If I'm going to be doing editing for this, this is a good way to capture and make sure, like, hey, I don't want the sky to blow out in this particular video. Well, I can put the luminance spot meter up there, monitor so that the highlights are not clipping out. It's not stopping growing. So typically, to me, I recommend anywhere between the 5.5 to 6 in luminance spot meter if you're in log. It means that you're going to have enough of that range on the high-end side of it that when I bring it into post, I can now start to bring certain things down. I can bring my highlights back down so that I know that there's still, one, there's information there. I'm not having to do any kind of, reconstruction for them. The info is there. I can bring that down. It brings my shadows back down to a particular point. And in general, you can get cleaner looking shadows. Now, a number of weeks ago, we talked about exposing like this. So I encourage you to go back. I think it was 4 streams ago. If I remember, I'll try to link to it. We talked that there are some downsides to filming like this with cameras. You get some different hue shifts in skin tones because you're shifting mid-tones so high up and then you have to pull it back down. But this can be a really simple way to get yourself the lowest noise at even in the higher ISOs. Because now in post, I can pull stuff back down and bury the noise that happens when you go up much higher in ISOs. Oh yeah. Last one on this particular setup, and then I'll get to the other questions that were in here, is going to be zebras. So zebras in Lumix cameras, you have 2 sets of zebras. You have Zebra 1, Zebra 2, and then you have a paired, so zebra 1 and 2. So if I go into the set option here, I can set what I want my zebras to be. So you've got up to 85% in this particular case because I'm in Arilog C3. So you got 85%, or you have a base range. Base range is going to say, what do I want my zero stop to be? So, and I was actually wrong. So Arilog is 39 IRE according to this. So what this will say is that I want zebras to show up to show me where my middle gray point is, where my zero stop is. Then I can come in and say how much of a variance do I want. It's third of a stop effectively, so 0.2, or I can go all the way up to 1. The smaller the range, obviously the tighter the band is where it's going to actually show you what the zebra pattern is. But you also have the option to kind of come in here. So like, let's say I want to set this to 80%. Let's say I want to set this one to 60%. Now if I turn zebras 1 and 2 on and we look, you'll notice that I have two separate patterns here. I have in the front, I have a crosshatch. Well, you can see it on the hand too. You get the opposing crosshatches. These are telling you your two different values. So on the wall where the luminance spot meter is, you see that that's at the 5.5 stops over. So you know that you're up in that 80, you're at 80% or higher. When I go into the other, or the smaller range, which would be down here, you see that that's in the 3.8. So that's down at that 60% mark. So zebras are another tool available within the system that you can use for judging exposure. Personally, I'm not a big fan of zebras. I think they're a little overly complicated for what they show you, especially knowing that we have false color, which I think gives you a much more accurate representation of the exposure values that you're looking for, and luminance spot meter, because I can literally just pick out the exact spot that I want to find out where my exposure is going to be for that particular scene. But you have access to all of those in these cameras. Let's jump back because there's a bunch of questions and comments that ran through, and I want to make sure that I address them. Are the old Vericam Vlog LUTs on Panasonic's site what we should use to convert Vlog in DaVinci Resolve, or use color space transform conversion? In general, it's up to you. It's up to you with whatever your workflow is. Yes, you can use our conversion LUTs, the options that are available that were originally launched for the Vericam and the EVA 1. Sure, you can use them. If you're looking for hyper accurate color correct, I think there are some amazing LUTs out there from other individuals that have, created either super clinical or very highly color accurate, more stylistic. That's kind of the nice thing with Vlog, is you've got an open, kind of template to work with. Yeah, and it doesn't really matter which program you're going to be using for that. I just want to express my interest in new Micro Four Thirds power zoom lenses. Modern PZ lenses paired with the Blackmagic Studio Micro and A10 Minis are a powerful combo for multicam live streams. Okay. Also, please always keep the 2x LUT feature. It's super helpful to have logged 709 at 100% and use different LUT to give the image character. Yeah, having multiple LUTs in the real-time LUT system is a nice update that we've done over the years. I think everything is about that. Well, I'm happy you're enjoying the streams. Does the native ISO change when using real-time LUT? The video comes out quite noisy at 4,000. Am I doing something wrong? It can depend. So let me actually jump to dual native ISOs. So let's clean this mess up here. And then let's bring shutter speed. All right. Not a great looking image, and we're going to change color profile. We're going to go to something that looks halfway decent. So, as far as dual native ISOs go. This is going to change depending on the base color profile that you have your camera set to. So when you want to use something like real-time LUT, you have to be more aware of what the base profile is for it and what that LUT was designed for. So, in many cases, if a LUT is coming where it's, hey, this is based on effectively the white paper. So this LUT is based on you exposing vlog where 18% gray is at 42 IRE, and then the rest of the setting is going to be lit the way you would light it to get your dynamic range. Then you use the vlog native ISOs. These will show depending on the camera that you're in. If you're on the new S series cameras, you may have noticed that there is a color line below my ISO scale. This is what tells me where my native ISO changes are. So in this particular case, 640 is my high native ISO, 100 is my low native ISO. If I go into vlog, you'll see that my low native ISO is 640, my high native ISO is 4000. And you get the changeover there. What likely I think is happening in your particular case, saying that you're seeing, a lot of noise at 4000 is it could be one of two things. One, the base profile that the LUT that you're using is not designed for vlog, which means you might be using a real-time LUT. Actually, I think I can demonstrate this kind of easier. So if I come in, let me go to real-time LUT. So that's a neutral one. Here, this is a standard one. So I've got clear S on here right now. So this is real-time LUT. This is with one of the LUTs off the LUMIX Lab app. If I come in and I go into my ISO values, you're going to notice that 4000 ISO, I'm way above the second native ISO range because it's way back here at 640. That's because that's based on a standard color profile. Most cases, that's what usually the problem is. The other issue is, like I mentioned before, if the LUT is designed for you to be overexposing the vlog footage, that could cause a difference in the way the LUT is being rendered to how you expose your footage. If it's not a great LUT, you could also be causing some challenges there, but most often it's because the LUT isn't being used in the right color profile. And it also depends on the camera. The newer cameras, so the S9 and newer, you can, if you load a LUT that you want to tie into your camera, if you load it into LUMIX Lab first, so import it from either Google Drive or locally on your phone, you can tie it to a particular profile and then double check and make sure that it's looking right, so that when you put it on the phone or on the camera, it'll automatically be flagged to switch the camera to the correct color profile for you. But yeah. Red says, Sean colorblind, casual LUMIX Live lore drop. Oh yeah, no, I'm colorblind with darker blues and I think, was it darker blues, greens, and like purples. Is there a way to use false color on the S9 or S5 Mark IIX? No, there is no official way. I think people have made LUTs that mimic false color that you could load on there. I can't speak for their accuracy, but the built-in false color is only something that is on the newer cameras at this time. Cool. So I swear, if you had false color and anamorphic D-squeeze for photo, I'll buy LUMIX until the end of my life and recommend it to everyone in each street in my city. Well, we're halfway there because false color is is available for photos. Or no, if you just mean false color for all of it and anamorphic D-squeeze for photos. Yeah. I really want D-squeeze for photos as well. So I am on your side with wanting to see that. All right, let's see. I want to make sure that I hit crop zoom and hybrid zoom. All right. Go here. All right. So let's see, we covered frame rates, resolutions, false color, lumen spot, that. We talked about color profiles, crop zoom, and hybrid zoom. So within the newer series of cameras, we have these different options called crop zoom and hybrid zoom. Depending on the mode that you are going to be recording in, you may or may not have access to these particular options. So right now you can see, because I am recording in the 6K open gate option, I can't use hybrid zoom or crop zoom. That's because I need to go to a resolution that is below what the actual resolution of the sensor is. So in this particular case, as I scroll down, you'll notice a couple of things here. When I get far enough down here, well, oh, that's full HD. I'm not in the right setup. Let's change this to any, and let's go to 4K. We'll keep this one simple. So, all right, I've got 4K 60p. Let me reset the ATEM. So now that I'm in 4K 60p, which remember, this is the S1II, so it's going to function like an S5 Mark II or an S5 Mark IIX, which means it's going to crop in to Super 35. I'm going to crank my ISO because I'm not super worried about exposure here for this demonstration, but I am going to change the color profile to something that doesn't look super terrible. All right, so right now I'm in APS. Actually, no, let me do this in 24 frame or 30 frame. This will make more sense with 30 frame, which means I got to do this again. All right, so we're in 30 frame, full sensor width, visibility. All right, so for hybrid zoom, now I can go back into the menus here, and you'll see that hybrid zoom and crop zoom are illuminated, which means I can make changes to them. I can utilize these features. Now, hybrid zoom is the function that is tied directly to the lens's reported focal length. So before I enable this, if you notice, so I have the 24 to 60 on here right now. As I make this zoom, you'll see that right next to the percentage, I'm getting a millimeter rating. It's telling me what the focal length is of this particular lens. So if I go to, let's see, let's move this. Let's set it up so I can get a wider shot. Let's go 60. There we go. So we're at 24, right? What hybrid zoom allows me is to come in here, I can go to set, and I can pick how I want this to be displayed to me. Do I want it to give me the composite focal length, which means just the focal length as whatever the multiplied effect is going to be, or do I want it to give me the plus cropped magnification? We're going to leave it as composite. And then you have an option in video for the effect at wide angle. So this is just, do you want right from the widest angle point of the lens to it to start doing the crop zoom function? In this case, I'm going to leave it on. Now I'm going to turn hybrid zoom on. Nothing's changed, right? We're still at 24 millimeter. We're still in 4K, 23976, so 30 frames per second. But you'll see now that there's an HYZ at the top. This indicates that hybrid zoom is on. So now, as I start to zoom, notice that the number is rapidly changing. We're at 60. I'll try to stop it right at 60. So we're at 60 here. And then let me move my focus down. So we are at 60 for focal length. On the lens, I'm only effectively at about 30-ish or 40-ish millimeter. No, actually I'm about like 45. Now if I zoom all the way to 60, you'll see that I get that little bit extra of a zoom. So this is with hybrid zoom enabled. I can turn my 24 to 60 into a 24 to 93. And in video, this is fully dependent on the frame rate and resolution that you're going to be recording at. So no matter what, this is giving me a 4K 422 10-bit all intra 30 frames per second output piece of video. The difference is it's now actively scaling as I'm making this zoom. So it's not just always being at the full sensor width, it's now allowing it to go down into the pixel to pixel range. So when I get all the way to here at 93 millimeter, this is effectively reading at 4K 422 10-bit 30 frames per second in 3840 by 2160 at a pixel to pixel readout. And you see this if I go and I change this to 1080p. So if I come in here and we change this to 1080p, which effectively will give us the tightest crop. So if I go down to full HD 422 10-bit all intra, you'll see how much tighter that goes. So again, I can shoot from the full sensor width in full HD 422 10-bit 30 frames per second. But as I make this zoom, I also have the ability to go all the way to 187 millimeter and still be maintaining proper 1920 by 1080 at 30 frames per second without any kind of upscaling or downscaling necessarily the way the system works. So if you need extra reach when you're going to be capturing video, this can be a viable option depending on the particular situation that you might be in. Maybe, you're not super concerned about always having to downsample the image from the 6K. Well, you can use hybrid zoom and know that, hey, if I really got to crank it all the way in, I can be at pixel to pixel 4K or 1080 and I'm gonna be fine for it to work. It's all just to give you more flexibility. Now, the alternate option for this is called crop zoom. So if I turn hybrid zoom off, and then we'll do crop zoom. When I go into set, excuse me, when I go into set, you have the same tools. You have focal length display, and then zoom speed for video. Now this one's a little weird, so I'm going to change this to high for both of these, just to get the point across. High is fast, M is medium speed, low is low speed, SL is super low speed. So when I turn this on, you'll notice that I get a new pop-up on the screen here, which tells me 24 millimeter. Well, if I press up on the directional pad, it lets me do a punch in. In this case, because I'm in 1080p, I can make my 24 mil always be punched into a 75. Now, if I start to zoom my lens, it starts at 75 and goes all the way out to 187. Crop zoom is... the difference between crop zoom and hybrid zoom is that crop zoom is designed as the tool to give you, in general, a set point for the crop. So if you're working with a fixed focal length lens and you want to be able to zoom with that lens within, effectively like you would with hybrid zoom, you can do it with crop zoom because you can assign different points here. So that as I press this, it gives me 2 or 3 different steps if I press left to right between those, and I can adjust the speed at which it moves through those points, or I can press up and down in the directional pad and have it punch in. The safety thing here being that you have, you're always going to be at 1:1 pixel or above when you're going to be using hybrid zoom or crop zoom. Let's see here. How does it work if using hybrid zoom or crop zoom plus using higher stabilization that crops in? Does that punch in further than pixel to pixel? Haven't tried yet. Just curious. That's a good question. Honestly, I haven't either. I'll have to look into it because honestly, I don't really know. So. So let's do this. So, I mean, it effectively, help if you can see. So effectively, I have high E stabilization on right now. Effectively, because high E stabilization is going to adjust your, at the starting point of it, it's just starting from wherever your start point is. So your reach effectively should be the same. The difference is just that you're going to be cropping in if you set things like high E stabilization for that particular case. Yeah, so you see that you get that punch in there. Let's see. False color. Okay, cool. Looks like we're good there. Oh man, it's 1:15 already. All right. I want to talk about audio. So we did dual native, we did image stabilization, anamorphic settings real quick. So anamorphic within our cameras. So let's turn this off. Within the LUMIX cameras, so anamorphic in general, I'm not really going to talk about frame rates or aspect ratios because they're going to vary depending on the lens that you use and what your desired output for the squeeze ratio is going to be. What I will talk about in this particular case are the tools that we have built in here. So within our cameras, if you go under the image stabilization function, to my knowledge, we are still the only company doing this. You'll have an option here under anamorphic video for stabilization of your anamorphic lenses. We cover everything from 1.3, 1.33, 1.5, 1.6, 1.8, and 2.0. That's the vast majority of optics that you're going to see on the market that would be compatible with these cameras and not some obscure aspect ratio. So what this does is this allows us to say, hey, I'm using a 133x anamorphic. I want to be able to properly run the stabilization for it so that I don't actually make rolling shutter artifacts even worse, and I don't make weird warpy mess out of the footage if I happen to be, needing to move or walk with the lens. So you can enable this, and on the screen, right above my head here, you're going to see that it adds a little A1.33 or A1.6 or 1.5, whatever the mode is that you're on. This tells the system in the stabilization unit to properly adjust itself for anamorphic use. Now, with anamorphics, you typically don't want a roll adjustment in your stabilization because now your footage is going to start to do this as you move. Rolling shutter, if you've shot anamorphic, you know that anamorphic exacerbates rolling shutter because you're squeezing an image, which makes everything taller, which makes a shorter area to start noticing the rolling shutter. So making sure that you're not adding to that with a stabilization system is a big deal. But on top of that, you also have different de-squeeze functionalities. So being able to come in and set the anamorphic de-squeeze for the display, which I know where it is. This is what allows us, again, to be able to come in and say, hey, I want to be able to preview what it is that I'm viewing in the proper squeeze ratio. So I'm not stuck saying, all right, I'm using a pretty aggressive 2x anamorphic lens. That image really would be squished super thin, really tall in the frame. It's going to be really hard to use your focus tools to be able to try to tell where focus should be. If it's an autofocus lens, it makes things a little bit easier, but your display isn't really going to look great. So framing is much harder. In here, we now have that ability to just have the camera de-squeeze the preview for you. Now, this does just de-squeeze the preview, and it will not do it out over HDMI. But this is where if you're shooting this kind of content, you're using an external monitor, your external monitor, more often than not, is also going to have de-squeeze tools as well, so that you can preview the HDMI signal de-squeezed on that side. And then as far as anamorphic goes, like I said, our biggest thing is that we have the de-squeeze tools, we have the aspect ratios. You get the ability to go in there and say, I want to shoot 3x2 or I want to shoot 4x3. Even though 133s are, fairly, popular right now, like I'm using a 133 anamorphic right now. This is the Sur 40. I'm using it in the 3x2 aspect ratio mode on the S1II. Why? Because that gives me a 2:1 aspect ratio. So I have a proper 2:1 aspect ratio that shows up right here. I don't have, you know, the kind of pencil thin image that sometimes you get. So I still get some of the character that people like for anamorphic. So I get the flares, you get all that kind of fun stuff. But on our cameras, you have the widest range of what aspect ratios you want. So with this, I don't have to cut anything off. I don't have to trim it. I can take 2:1. If I ever wanted to record video with these in full frame, or with the 40 at least, I can load the 2:1 aspect ratio video direct onto platforms like Instagram, and it doesn't crop it. If you try to do a 2:4:1, it crops it. It's going to try to clip the sides out. At least the last time I tried to upload stuff with that aspect ratio. So this gives you a wide breadth of compatibility with these different lenses. Now that there's more and more anamorphic lenses coming out, especially now with the autofocus side of it, you basically don't have a better choice than working with our cameras if you're even remotely interested in working with anamorphic tools. All right, I got about 5 or 6 more minutes left before I have to end the stream today. We're gonna skip focus transition and live cropping today. We've talked about them before in other streams, so I will put a link to a video about those right here. But I want to talk about audio. So within many of the LUMIX cameras, we have compatibility for higher quality audio. A lot of times, may not necessarily be looking at this stuff across the board in your own day-to-day with the cameras. But on the S series cameras, let me go back to my main cam, we have this device. This is the DMW XLR2. This is an XLR audio interface that connects in through the hot shoe that gives you 2 XLR inputs. I can do this backwards. Gives you 2 XLR inputs and a 3.5 millimeter input right here. The cool thing about this is that this device, when paired with the modern cameras, is getting you 32-bit float audio through XLR and through 3.5. So you'll see that it just lit up on the screen there. So I've got my 32-bit 96 kilohertz. What's cool about this, or even cooler I think, is that you do also have the 4-channel audio functionality. So if I'm using the XLR2 and I select 4-channel for XLR, that means that I can be plugging in 2 XLR mics into channel 1 and channel 2. So say I've got 2 people that need to be interviewed. I've got channel 1 for the one person, channel 2 for the other person. And then I could take my 3.5 mil and I can be running that as maybe a surround audio. Maybe I've got 2 other people, so I can plug another set of lavs into the 3.5. Now all 4 channels have their own independent audio. And even bigger than that, all 4 of the channels are 32-bit float. So if I need to make adjustments, I need to correct for the fact that not everybody speaks at the same volume. Maybe you got one person who's a much quieter talker, another person who's very loud or projects their voice really well. I now, with the one device, and then whatever microphones I want to bring to the table with this, I've got the flexibility to correct all of that stuff and level it out. And I don't have to necessarily mess around with the levels on each of the microphones or constantly have to go in and be like, hey, you know, for this person, I'm having to constantly tweak and monitor their levels because maybe this person just all of a sudden gets really excited and now all of that audio is ruined because it's clipped. 32-bit float saves you that. You also, one thing to note, if you are going to be working with 32-bit float on our cameras is, and I'm going to change this to large so y'all can see it. If you look at the audio scale down in the bottom, so right now it's telling you that we're in 32-bit float. We're on 48 kilohertz. But if you'll notice, the audio meters here, they only go to 0 and there's no color coding to them. Obviously, I don't have a microphone plugged into this, so you're not seeing the levels bounce. But it goes to 0, but there's no color coding to it. It's all green. Well, that's because 32-bit float, you're not gonna run into an issue in the format itself where you're necessarily going to clip everything. What's more likely going to happen, and actually, Brendan, so lavs themselves are not necessarily going to be 32-bit. So the microphones that you plug into this are not necessarily 32-bit. You can still, even if you've got 32-bit float on the cameras, you can still overwhelm the capsules or the microphones themselves and clip at the microphone level, which will still show up as clipped for 32-bit. So making sure that you're using a good quality microphone with a 32-bit float input on these on this particular setup is equally as important. So you can't just throw a cheapo microphone on it and it's going to work. Yes, yeah, you're gonna clip the mic before the preamp, before the AD converters in here. So yeah, so on the camera itself, you'll see there that the audio levels are gonna be all green because technically you're not ever actually gonna clip anything. But if I come back in here and I change this to 24-bit, you get the normal traditional green, yellow, red. So you get the stoplight for the audio there. And that's a nice kind of safety thing. It's a weird thing if you've never worked with 32-bit float audio or never had an experience with it, because most of the settings that you have on the mic itself, so limiters, the gain levels, the in general, like well, yeah, gain levels, limiters, and the gain pot on there, they really don't do anything in 32 when you're recording out as 32-bit float onto the file. It's just going to be there when you bring it into post, even Premiere, you literally just take the gain slider in Premiere and bring it down, and all of those high-end things that would normally be clipped are brought back into the audible spectrum. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So that is one of the functions that you have. Now, if you don't have a camera that has 32-bit float, you'll also notice that a lot of our cameras have moved over to 24-bit for the audio from 16-bit that was used, more commonly years ago. And the XLR2 and an XLR1, the XLR1 is just the previous generation one, are compatible across the different setups. Like, it doesn't really matter. You can use them on many of the cameras, from the GH7, the GH6, the G9 Mark II, S5II, S5IIX, S1II Series across the board. You've got a number of the different cameras that are available when you want to get this next level, higher level audio functionality. And yeah, it's just a solid setup for that little focused part when you're first getting into some audio. Not everybody pays attention to audio capture a lot of times. But if your audio doesn't sound great, people tend to not want to stick around and watch, even if you've got really good looking footage. So yeah. Okay, we're at 2:30 in Austin, which means I have to wrap up for the end of this stream. Thank you all so much for tuning in, for asking your questions, for listening to me describe some of these things, even if these are topics that you probably already knew. If you've been watching with this three-part series since the beginning, the idea here is, I typically try to, once a year, go back and just strip everything back down a bit to the basics so that these can be searched or, kind of chopped up into smaller little bits that can hopefully help people, be a reference to say, hey, I want to, a quick, what does this mean? Or where, how do I access that feature? Obviously, I can't cover everything. We would end up going, literally reading the manual together, which that would be a really long set of videos. But if you have stuff that you want to see covered specifically, things that I didn't miss that maybe you consider basic that I didn't consider basic to begin with, let us know. Let me know down in the comments after this video. What are things that you consider basic for your cameras? What are the first couple of things that maybe you change or you set up to defaults when you first get one of our cameras, whether it's photo, video, general settings across the board? And we'll go through and make a bunch of videos that kind of walks through and kind of shares that information out. the people actually using these cameras are the ones that educate even us in many cases in what's the best way to use some of these features, what's the most inventive way to use some of these things. We design stuff because you guys ask us to, and it fits the needs that the community, that filmmakers, that photographers, that hybrid creators want and need for their jobs. The more you feed us back that kind of information, the better it is that we can build future products for you. They may not always come in the most timely manner, so just kind of keep stuff like that in mind. But know that you've got the voice here. You've got the ability to reach out to us, to join these streams, to check us out over on Discord, to join the conversation there, get your recommendations and your suggestions for us in how to improve things in the future. You've got a couple different touch points, and I look forward to hearing more from many of you. Like I said, put those comments down there. What are the things that you change first in your cameras? What are the things that you consider basics for it? And we can always continue this series moving forward. We will be off again next week and coming back the following week on the 26th. We're probably going to be continuing this bi-weekly schedule for Lumix Live. This way, they can be longer in their own individual streams, but also not necessarily overbearing to where we're going to be kind of retreading a lot of the same content. But yeah, we will be back on the 26th. So be sure to tune in right here on YouTube for that. If you haven't already, go check out Discord. We have a link down in the description. I'm constantly over there. I'm not always the fastest to respond during the week, but if you tag me, if you send me a direct message, you can always reach out. We can troubleshoot things. You can continue these conversations over there as well. Check us out on Instagram, over on TikTok, all the different platforms as well. And with that, I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Get out there, create some cool stuff, have an awesome weekend, and we'll see you in 2 weeks right here on Lumix Live. Later.